On the Insiders this week, Iowa Senator Joni Ernst from D.C. on why she thinks the governor is right to send state troopers to the Mexican border and whether she's advised the governor to head to the U.S. Senate. And some insider information into 2022. We'll look at which Iowans likely have big political plans for next year and which ones don't. And in the Insider's Quick Six, this Iowan's challenge for the months ahead.
From your local election headquarters, this is The Insiders with Dave Price.
Iowa Senator Joni Ernst recently spent several days in Kosovo. She was checking in on the U.S. peacekeeping mission in that southeastern European country. This was not her former Iowa National Guard unit, but she had served with some of the members. She supports the Guard's mission in Kosovo. She does not support President Biden's decision to pull troops out of Afghanistan. The U.S. has essentially been at war in that region for 20 years.
We don't want to engage in endless wars. But again, this was focused on security and stability operations. And unfortunately, we now see the country of Afghanistan again moving in an unstable direction. Our overall concern is that the United States is safe. And I had the opportunity to sit down with President Ghani of Afghanistan last week. And one of his security advisors made a very important observation. He said that so oftentimes we hear American politicians saying how we don't ever want to see Afghanistan as a safe harbor for terrorists. And he said, you know, that makes no sense because there are still terrorists residing in Afghanistan. So unfortunately, we're put in a situation now where we won't have Americans on the ground to monitor the situation, to safeguard against those terrorists as they plot against the United States. It'll have to be done from afar.
Speaking of security, we have a small number of our Guard members on the southern border there with Mexico. Do you think that should be their role?
It is when it is focused on national security. And so it is important, and those decisions will be made by the governor. But I do believe that there has been a security threat at the border. We saw not too long ago two Yemenis that were men that were apprehended by Border Patrol that are on the terrorist watch list. We see other countries that are taking advantage of our very porous and almost open border to try and slip terrorists in through the border. So engaging our National Guard, it does make sense in that we are providing a level of protection in various ways, whether it is for observation, reconnaissance, whatever the task might be. But again, those missions will be evaluated by the governor and by her advisors. And it is important that we safeguard our country. We see this, of course, through deployments overseas. But right here in our homeland, we have to make sure that we don't see terrorists slipping in through a broken system.
Is it the role of state troopers? We have a couple of dozen state troopers who will be going down there to help with security measures. Are they trained for that? Should that be an appropriate use of that resource?
Well, again, this is through an EMAC agreement, and the governor has provided those state troopers for that mission. But we have to remember that not only are we impacted in our southern states, particularly Texas or Arizona, those border states, but that those people that are entering illegally are also perhaps bringing drugs in. I've spoken to a number of members of our counter drug task force, and most of the methamphetamine that is sold in the state of Iowa comes from Mexico. It is smuggled in illegally. So to have law enforcement from Iowa present at the border to stop those types of human trafficking, drug trafficking, gun trafficking opportunities that those people in Mexico, those warlords in Mexico, seeing those opportunities, if we can push back against that, I think that that is worthy. And so the governor, again, she will take all of those considerations. She will evaluate and do what is absolutely appropriate for the people of the state of Iowa. And if it means we are stopping drugs from coming into our state, if it means that we are stopping illegal human trafficking into our state, which we do have a significant amount of people that are traffic through Iowa, then it is the appropriate use for law enforcement.
I guess my question is, wouldn't federal agents, wouldn't even National Guard members be better trained for a mission like that? I appreciate what state troopers do within our border here in Iowa, but how would they be specifically trained compared to those other folks for this type of work there?
Well, I don't have the specifics on the type of mission that the troopers will be engaged in, but if it is law enforcement activities, our Iowa National Guardsmen are not necessarily trained on law enforcement. They are obviously trained in reconnaissance. They're trained in patrolling. But when it comes to actual law enforcement and being able to apprehend people, that is not what our National Guard is trained for. It is something that troopers would likely be trained for.
Speaking of the governor, as we close out here, I've heard some talk from some who, the governor talks frequently about her relationship with you. There's talk here that you and the governor have spoken about the possibility of her running for the United States Senate if your colleague Chuck Grassley does not seek re-election. Is that true or not? Have you had those conversations?
I can neither confirm nor deny. I certainly hope that Senator Grassley is evaluating another term in the Senate. But I would say, too, that the governor is an exceptional leader, and that, of course, if Senator Grassley should choose not to run, I think she would be a wonderful, wonderful partner here in the United States Senate.
You can neither confirm nor deny. What does that mean?
Well, obviously, Kim and I have many conversations that we'll keep personal and confidential. But I can appreciate her leadership. And if that's on the horizon, I certainly would be supportive of that.
All right, so neither confirm nor deny. We brought in two longtime Iowa insiders on what that means.
She meant that two women political leaders in the state of Iowa that talk regularly and are good friends have probably talked about it, Dave. Okay.
Does Kim Reynolds want to be a senator or governor?
That's a good question. It would seem to me that she would want to continue to be governor. I mean, governors have, in terms of politics and in terms of states, it's far more important, honestly, to have the governorship than it is to have a United States senator, not belittling United States senators. So I would think that she would want to continue to be governor. However, if Senator Grassley doesn't run again, I imagine she will be under a lot of pressure to run, just as Governor Sununu in New Hampshire is to run for the Senate.
Jerry, over the years you've counseled many a Democratic candidate for one office or another on messaging. Why would Joni Ernst phrase it in such a way?
Well, first of all, they are good friends and they do talk. Mm-hmm. That's a funny thing about women. They do talk. Men have trouble understanding that sometimes, but that's the situation there. I think
only said that for your wife, hoping that she's watching.
or not watching.
Or not watching.
I do think that it's easier being a United States Senator. And she has her good friend there. I don't think it will come to that. I think we're going to, we'll I'm sure get to other topics, but I doubt that, I personally doubt that Grassley will run.
All right, you don't think he's going to run again?
Correct.
And he's Mike, it's felt like he sort of delayed this decision a little bit. I guess you can look at different ways historically when this announcement would come, but he's saying in the fall, September or October. Mm-hmm. Why would he wait that long if he is indeed going to run again?
Because he's Chuck Grassley and he's been around as long as he has, and he understands politics in Iowa about as well as anybody does. I think he will run again. That I have no inside information about that. I just think, and partly because he is waiting till fall, I think he will run again. There's a lot of pressure institutionally in the Senate for him to run again. Mitch McConnell dearly wants him to run again. Some of his friends out there dearly want him to run again, because if he does, they don't think that this is going to be a problem in terms of keeping that seat.
Dave, I'll tell you one thing. Congresswoman Ashley Hinson agrees with me that he's not going to run, and you can tell that by watching her behavior She has become more and more conservative in her views and that she espouses, and she clearly has all the earmarks of somebody who believes she could be running statewide next time.
She's a former state representative for the Cedar Rapids area there, represents the 1st Congressional District, but is from the Des Moines Metro. So has connections in a couple of places.
Maybe that's why she's pursuing Des Moines media all the time, or maybe not. Maybe it's because she's getting ready to run statewide.
You know, let me play the devil's advocate on that. It could very well be that that's the case, and she does seem to be aligning herself more with Donald Trump. The question is whether or not in a general election in Iowa, and I realize I think I was a Republican state, whether or not that is going to be a huge plus or not in the general election. I don't think we know that yet, because one never knows exactly what it is that former President Trump is going to do, or even more importantly, what he is going to say.
What about specifically Governor Reynolds? Let's just say she runs again for re-election.
Yes.
For Governor Mike. Her relationship with President Trump in the past, and she campaigned quite a bit with him, spoke favorably of him, rarely ever criticized him. Is it hard to know then, you're saying, that whether that would help or hurt her next year?
Well, I don't think it would hurt. I don't think it would hurt Governor Reynolds.
In a general?
Yes, in a general. I don't, because she's established. Ashley Hinson is not. And I realize that there is still a lot of support for the former president in Iowa. But I think there's a difference between Kim Reynolds and Ashley Hinson. I think Kim Reynolds can do things that Ashley Hinson cannot.
We shall see here now. Up next, the insider's view on the 3, or maybe it's just the 2 Democrats who will run for the U.S. Senate next year.